literally felt light come. And when I say I felt light, it was like tangible light, like I felt light come and surround me. I began to see my life. Here I am held in these divine arms, and I'm watching my life, and I'm saying, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And I'm attempting to justify things, but the creator that held me said, what did you learn? Will be done. And what I was told is that God said to me, my will is your will. That's how much you're loved. My will is that you have free will. My will is that you get to choose.
Welcome into another Key of David podcast. And again, we give Trevor Keys the excused absence because he is engaged in some very important business in Babylon. And I'm grateful that I'm not in Babylon today, that I get to host this show with David, the Lion Douglas. And we have an amazing guest for you. I'm so grateful that he agreed to come on here to Zion Media and share his story. And if there's one thing that our followers continue to ask for is they say, Shane, David, can we get some more NDEs? And we have one for you that, in my opinion, is one of the most precious, sacred, beautiful stories that I've heard. And we're joined by Jeffrey Olson. He's going to tell you a little bit about who he is. Currently is working for BYU TV, which, by the way, I love. I watch lots of BYU TV. I use BYU TV to actually consume The Chosen. So I'm grateful for the app. It's a free app. Doesn't cost you anything. It's not even like Netflix. Like, people complain, oh, what's the church doing with all this? Like, just look. They're providing free content. It doesn't cost you anything. And it's amazing content. It's spiritually oriented. It's spiritually uplifting. And so we're grateful to be joined by Brother Olson, Jeffrey Olson. Happy to have you on here at Zion Media. And I'm excited to hear this story again.
Well, Shane, it's a pleasure. It's an honor to be with you, and thank you. And yes, BYU TV and BYU Broadcasting, what we do here, it really is. It's a privilege for me because we get to provide value-based content as an alternative to what's out there. And yes, it's free. BYU TV, BYU Radio. You can download the app and enjoy what we do. It's really a blessing. We were nominated recently this year for 11 Emmys, which was crazy. This little network out of Provo, Utah. And here about 3 days ago, we actually won 2. So
for which programs?
We won for Wizard of Pause editing, and we won for no, it wasn't Wizard of Pause. Forgive me, it was All Round Champion. We won for editing, and then we got a Best Supporting Actor in Mallory Towers. So we do everything from scripted drama to reality stuff to comedy. And yet we don't do it for the awards. We don't do it, that's not why we're doing this. We're doing this to provide an alternative of value-based content for families, and that's what it's all about. But thanks for putting a plug in there. And I work as the creative director here, the director of creative services, and that's what I do in my job. We all have jobs to do, and I'm very lucky and blessed to have this job. And yet today, I know we're going to talk about maybe more about the personal stuff, and we'll get quite personal if that's okay. Because what I want to share today, and what I do share about, and I've now shared this quite publicly, but it took a while. What happened to me and what I experienced was so personal and so painful. And so I had to process it. It took a while, and it took me almost a decade before I shared any of this outside of close, family members and very close friends. And you mentioned the near-death experience, the out-of-body experience, the NDE, they're called. And I'll just take you back to what happened, what caused my near-death experience, but also I'd love to talk about the life experience and how that shifts things within me anyway, and within many. And we'll go there. So It's worthwhile to point out it's been almost 3 decades. In fact, coming up here at the end of the week, March 31st will be the 28th year anniversary of my accident. So it's a very tender time. It's always around Easter time. And it was an automobile accident. We had taken a family vacation and we'd gone down to southern Utah. It was a road trip. We loaded the boys up in the car seats and we packed the car, and we were going to see my wife's family down there and spend Easter weekend with them. And it was a beautiful weekend. We had dinner. We did family traditions where we hard boiled the eggs and colored all the Easter eggs and put them out in the garden and let the kids go find them on Easter morning. And we'd had a lovely time. And it was Monday, time to come back home. And we had breakfast. We said our goodbyes. I had loaded the kids in the car and, got all the luggage in. Everything was ready to go. And we were in the car just pulling away from the curb. And my wife, Tamara, her folks were there waving goodbye like grandma and grandpa do on the porch. And I was just pulling away from the curb and Tamara said to me, "Stop, wait." And I thought she had forgot something. She'd left her bag in the house. But what she said to me, I will always remember. She said, "Stop, wait." And I looked at her and she said, "I just want to say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time." Now, I bring that up for a specific reason. I think we all get impressions. We all get those whispers. We get that thought, that intuition, that it's like, and what I love about Tamara is she acted on it. "Stop, wait. I want to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad." And this was not uncommon. I watched as she jumped out of the car and we'd already hugged them and said goodbye, but she ran up on the porch and I witnessed and noticed as she hugged them and kissed them both. And I just saw that. And that was not uncommon or out of the ordinary, but she hugged them, she kissed them, she ran back in the car, and away we went. But it's in hindsight that this becomes so important, because as the day played out, that was the last goodbye. And I just love the fact that she got that whisper, she got that feeling, she got that hit from the Spirit, and she said, "I'm going to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time." And she did so. I put the car out on the interstate. I cranked the cruise control up to about 75 miles an hour, which is as fast as I could legally go. And, I'm thinking about all the stuff I've got to get done. It's Monday morning. I'm going to miss a day of work. We got a 5+ hour trip ahead of us. And you do that. It's all the to-do list in your head. And okay, I got to catch these things up. And I had a little moment leading up to this accident. I say moment because it was literally a moment. I just glanced in the rearview mirror. I just glanced in the rearview mirror to see what traffic was doing, to see if there was traffic. And as I glanced in the rearview mirror, it's almost like time stopped in that moment. I noticed my little son, Griffin, our youngest, and he was sound asleep in his car seat. And it's interesting how we were told we might not have more children after Spencer, and it took 6 years to get him here. But there he was, this miracle boy. And I noticed details. I noticed how his hands were laying on the little car seat thing in front of him. And I noticed how long his eyelashes were. And I just thought, what a gift. And at the same time, in that same moment, I heard Spencer, my 7-year-old, and he was playing with action figures that he had gotten in his Easter basket and just making all the joyful noise of a little boy. And, the grandest lightsaber battle in the universe. I just, so I'm seeing my toddler son sound asleep. I'm listening to my 7-year-old playing happily in the back seat. And I actually glanced over at Tamara, my wife, and she had also reclined her seat back and she was sound asleep, but she was still holding on to my hand. And I thought, what a gift, I mean, we're 10 years into this marriage. We're both chasing careers and raising children, and she's still holding my hand. Like she did the first time I took her to the movies and had a few extra bucks as a college student. And it was just absolute moment of gratitude. And I point these things out because I think we have those. It's these little things in life that become the big things. Watching her run up and kiss mom and dad, my wife, and then sitting in the car and just feeling the connection and the gratitude.
So it's like Alma says, it's the small and simple things that great things are brought to pass. And small means in many instances doth confound the wise. It's just these small things.
Yeah, it's the little things, and they are the big things. I mean, wow, she's holding my hand. I mean, big deal. But yes, it is a big deal.
Yeah, and it is.
Yeah. I mean, it was, but I was noticing this stuff. It was very apparent. And it was probably about an hour after that everything shifted, everything turned. And there was reports of heavy crosswinds. There was reports of a pickup truck driving erratically on the interstate. I think one of the hardest parts of the story is the fact that I believe I may have dozed off at the wheel, just for a second, just nodded off. And there's no excuse for that. I mean, I think back and, being a young father and the pressure to provide and protect and do, and, you're working those 14, 16-hour days. You guys are in that. You're in the middle of it. You know how that is. But I believe that just for a moment, I may have just dozed off. And in doing so, I swerved to the right. And then I overcorrected to the left, and I lost control of the car. And the car began to roll not off the road, but down the road on that hard concrete at 75 miles per hour. It was a horrible automobile accident. The reports say the car rolled no less than 6 or 8 times. I blacked out for the actual crashing. I was aware, oh my gosh, I've lost control of the car. We're crashing. I blacked out until the car came to a complete stop. And when it came to a complete stop, I was completely conscious. And the first thing I heard was my 7-year-old crying hysterically in the back seat. And my initial reaction is, I've got to get to my boy. I have got to get to my son. And that's when I realized I couldn't move. I mean, I was pinned, and I don't know if it was the seat or the floorboard. I was somewhat disoriented. There was all the broken glass. And I was unaware of my injuries. I knew I was struggling to breathe, and there was intense pain, but the adrenaline, I wasn't aware of the injuries. What had actually happened is both of my legs had been crushed and shattered. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. It had been so damaged. My back had been damaged. My rib cage was damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm was almost completely torn off. And then the seatbelt had cut through and ruptured all my intestines. I was not in a great place physically. I was unaware of that. The adrenaline, I just heard my son crying, and I'm like, I've got to get to my boy. But that's when I became acutely aware of the brutal reality that no one else was crying. And I won't go into the details of what I saw or experienced, but I knew in that moment that both Tamara, my wife, and Griffin, my youngest son, were gone. They were killed instantly in the accident. And that may be the darkest place a person could ever be. I mean, here I was in the car. I'm pinned, I'm trapped, I'm losing consciousness. I've got a hysterical 7-year-old. Half the family's gone. And I was driving. I mean, the guilt, the regret, how do I turn the clock back 3 seconds? How do I fix this? And there was no fixing it. And I don't share that to be morbid or graphic, simply that was the setting. I mean, that was the darkness. That was the despair, the trauma I was in, when I literally felt light come. And when I say I felt light, it was like tangible light, like I felt light come and surround me. And it felt as if I was rising above the accident scene. And suddenly I could breathe and there was no pain. And I was a little bit confused. I'm like, well, how can this be? How can I be okay? I mean, emotionally, I was still distraught, but the pain was gone. I could breathe easily. And I was in this light, a little bit disoriented. And then Tamara, my wife, who I knew was deceased at the scene, suddenly she was in this light with me. And yet she was very much alive. She was gorgeous. She was radiant. There was no injuries like I had witnessed in the accident. But she was emphatic that I not stay. She kept saying, Jeff, you got to go. You got to go. You can't stay here. You can't be here. And we literally had a conversation. I mean, we discussed the fact if I stayed with her, Spencer, our 7-year-old, would be orphaned. And we made a choice. No, for whatever reason, she couldn't come back and her injuries were more extensive than mine, but I could. And we made a deal, that I would come back and she would stay. And that was the most profound goodbye I may ever say. There I was looking at the woman I loved more than life. And yet I knew I had a 7-year-old in that car that was going to be okay. And we made a deal. And I chose to come back. And that was interesting because I didn't have to figure out how to come back. It wasn't like, oh, how do I get back to the accident or how do I get back? It was the intention. It was the thought. We have no idea how powerful our choice is, our thought. I knew I'm going back. And then it was like, whoosh, suddenly I found myself moving about a very busy level 1 emergency trauma center. And I have no concept of time in this bubble of light. I later found out people arrived at the scene. Spencer, my 7-year-old, was banged up a little bit. He had broken his wrist and his ribs were bruised. But physically, he basically walked away from the accident. Physically, emotionally, he thought the whole family was gone. With my injuries, I had to be extricated from the car and life flighted or airlifted to the level, the nearest level 1 trauma center, which was in Salt Lake City, LDS hospital. I didn't know any of that. I knew I'd crashed the car. I knew I'd said this profound goodbye. We'd made this choice. And here I was moving about the hospital. And it was almost as if I had 360-degree awareness. Like I was so aware of everything, of the doctors, the nurses, the patients, the families of the patients. It's like I was connected to everything and all of it. I call it a oneness. There was a oneness. There was a connectedness. And everyone I saw, I knew them perfectly. It was as if they were me and I was them. For example, I passed a nurse, and she was completely unaware of me, by the way, but I was so aware of her. I knew her love, her hate, her challenges, her motivation, her peace. I knew everything in a moment, in an instant. And I even experienced, the abuse that she had received as a child, physical, emotional, sexual abuse. I was aware of it. I knew of it. It's as if it was part of me. We were connected. And yet in that same moment, I thought, look at the magnificence of her soul. I mean, here she is in the hospital, healing, serving, helping, doing. And this was true of everyone I saw. I saw their magnificence. And I felt this intense, profound connection to all of it. And I was seeing them as God sees us. I was seeing them so beautifully and yet so profoundly. And I had a verse come. I had the famous verse where Jesus said, "In as much as you've done it unto the least of one of these, you've done it unto me. And, people ask, well, when did we do it to you? Well, I was hungry and you fed me. I was a stranger and you took me in. I mean, I used to embrace that as a beautiful verse about being nice. It was a nice verse about being nice, but here I was experiencing at a much deeper level. I'm like, wow, I am them. They are connected to me. What the master was saying is, I am the man in prison. I am the beggar in the street. I am the stranger that just wants acceptance. There was this whole new layer that was peeled back to that one verse. And I was like, wow. It was really heart expanding and soul expanding. And I was having this profound experience as I'm moving about the trauma center until I came to a body that I didn't feel anything from, which was odd, given this connected experience I was having. And that's when I stepped forward to take a closer look. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, that's me. Well, it wasn't me. I was having this profound spiritual out of body experience, but there was my body, there was my flesh, there was this tabernacle of clay. And I knew I had to get back in it. And it was so broken. I mean, there was so many injuries. And I had a profound experience looking at my body too, which I'll share with you in this setting. But I'm looking at my body, and there was like a narrative. There was like a mentoring that was going on. And I looked at my body and I was told, your body truly is the temple. Like I was realizing the magnificent machine my body was, which I had always taken for granted. I mean, I had not I don't have to remind my heart to beat or think about my lungs breathing or teach my eyes how to see. I was looking at this magnificent miracle of the body, and yet mine was so damaged, and yet I knew I was to get back in. And this narrative, this mentoring, your body literally is the temple. And going into it is a gift. Going into, like almost all the symbols became apparent that, wow, this is all symbolizing my spirit entering my body, my temple, to have this beautiful gift of life. And yet now mine was so damaged. And yet I'd given my word. I had made a commitment. I was going to come back. And again, I didn't have to figure out, how do I go back in? It was the thought. It was the choice. It was the intention. I'm going back in.
Wow. Do you see what he did there? He went right here, that pineal gland, that thought, just,
oh yeah.
the power of thought. Literally, I wrote a book on the power of thought. And it's interesting that you bring that up. It's just the thought, that concerted thought that you then knew. It's fascinating.
Well, and that it is. Wow, thought, as a man thinketh. I mean, it's like, boom. I mean, there we go. And it's choice. And I'll get into all that. I mean, there's so much choice in our thought. And I made the choice. I'm going back in, then, back into the body, but then back into all the trauma, all the pain, all the guilt, all the regret, all of the emotions and the physical and everything came weighting back down in such a way. I mean, it felt like I was in a lead box. I mean, it really was heavy going back in the body and having the grief and having the trauma. And I was ventilated. They had a, tube doing the breathing from my lungs. My legs were immobile. Obviously my right arm was immobile. They eventually, tied down my left hand because I kept grabbing at all the medical equipment. And there I was in all of it. And, there's that term, be still and know. And yet I had no choice. I mean, there I was in the hospital, basically incapacitated, much of the time unconscious. I was in ICU for weeks. And I learned a lot, but it was challenging. I mean, the hospital was difficult. I kept throwing pulmonary emboli, the blood clots that lodge in your lungs. And I had these horrible infections based on, my insides being ruptured all over everywhere. And it was really tough. I was so supported by my family. Gosh, I've got brothers. I'm the middle of 3 boys, and my brothers practically lost their jobs to come and sit with me in the hospital. I mean, to be with me, to support me. And there was
remarkable family.
Yeah. I mean, family and men. I mean, I grew up in a rough and tumble farm household of boys, and I had a father who I love and adore. He's passed now, but he was a soldier and a cowboy, and you didn't show emotion, and you just put on your pants and went to work. And yet I watched my brothers as real men, as tough and masculine as they are, and sometimes they weren't even aware that I was conscious of it. But I was very much aware of what was going on, and they would sit and hold my hand and cry. I mean, I remember my younger brother, and I don't know how he was selected or chosen or self-selected, but he was the one that they didn't know that I already knew everything. They didn't know that I was aware of everything that had happened at the accident. And I remember him coming and laying his head against mine and telling me they didn't make it. Tamara and Griffin didn't make it. And I knew that, but I can't imagine the turmoil within him. That he's believing he's telling me for the first time. He's believing I don't know, and I did know. But just a tender thing. I mean, men, if we showed up for each other, and we're so competitive sometimes as men. We want to win. We want to beat the other guy. We want to, we're competitive perhaps by nature, but I found a true meaning of what brotherly love is in this whole scenario. And my brothers were amazing examples of that. And and I mean, my mom and dad, and I mean, the guys at work. I mean, I had so much support, and I can't imagine having to do this alone. When someone has to truly tread the wine press alone, I had people all around me to support me, and it was difficult enough with that, but I got to give a nod to family and friends and the people that supported me through it. And I eventually did begin to get better. It's funny, I would be in ICU, I'd go to surgical recovery, I'd go back to ICU. I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. There was 18 surgeries in all putting me back together. And perhaps the most profound experience was at the end of my hospital stay. I was out of ICU, I was out of surgical recovery, I was out of regular hospital, and I was in the rehabilitation wing. And I'd been transferred to the University of Utah hospital, but I was there in the rehab unit. And it's probably worth pointing out the 2 most profound out-of-body experiences were at the scene of the accident, but before morphine and narcotics had been administered. And then at the end of my hospital stay, after I was off of all the heavy narcotics and I was just about ready to come home. And I was in quite a state. I mean, my left leg's amputated above the knee. My right leg is in a brace, held straight out all the time because they were trying to reconstruct that knee. My right arm was in a sling. They had attempted to reconstruct my shoulder. I was doing these strange shock therapies, trying to get the nerves to regenerate into the muscles. I had a colostomy bag from all the rupturing of the intestines. And there was a lot of, they were attempting to get me independent and well enough to go home. And I had laid so long on my back, the back of my head, I rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. The back of my head was bald. And my brothers were giving me a bad time about that too. But that was the state. And I was finally able to roll on my side and sleep. They had stabilized my abdominal injuries, and I naturally sleep on my side. And it was one night that I drifted into a deep sleep. And it was strange because I was sleeping, but I became aware that I was sleeping peacefully. I mean, it's like, wow, it had been months. Like I had slept, but I was aware of this peaceful slumber. And yet in that, I felt light come again. I felt that same light, like when I was at the accident scene, and I felt as if I was rising above the hospital bed. But this time the light, it dispensed, it went away, like it dispensed like fog, clearing, and I was in the most glorious place. I mean, people say heaven, the spirit world, the other side, there's all kinds of words. The only word that comes close to where I was is I was home. I mean, I was home and I was whole. I had both legs and both feet, and I began to run, and I was joyful. I'm like, I am home and I am whole and all is well. And I was just having this intense experience that felt so physical. Here's the incredible thing. It felt so physical. I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the intelligence in my thighs and calves as I'm running. And it was a sensational experience. But then I also got the message I wasn't there to stay. And I about that same time, there was this corridor off to my left, and I just knew intuitively, oh, I'm to go that way. So I began to work my way down this corridor. And at the end of the corridor was a crib, which was surprising. And yet Griffin, my little son, who was killed in the accident, he was still sleeping in a crib. He was only 14 months old. Of course, he was climbing out of it and starting to cause all kinds of trouble at home, but there was this crib, and so I raced to the crib, and when I looked in, there was my little boy, and he was sleeping peacefully, beautifully, just like when I glanced in the rearview mirror. He was perfect, and I noticed the details. I noticed how long his eyelashes were. I felt all this gratitude, and as a father, I leaned in and I swept him up. I picked him up, and it was so physical. I don't know if you've ever picked up a sleeping child, but there's a heat and a weight to them. And that was all very much there. And I held him, and he was solid against me, and I could feel his ribs expanding, and I could feel his breath on my neck. And I even leaned over and I smelled his hair. Like all the senses were, I smelled his hair. I thought, it's my boy. And here I was holding my son who had passed, and I began to weep, just thinking, how is it I get to hold him? I had grieved so miserably at the loss of half the family, and yet here I was holding him, and I began weeping. And as I held him and just leaned into the experience, I felt this presence behind me, and it was an overwhelming, powerful, cosmic, wise presence, and it was coming closer and closer. And actually I began to be a little bit fearful, because I thought, well, that's God. Wow, I'm in so much trouble. I mean, my little boy is here because I crashed the car. His life was short because I dozed off or I overcorrected, and there was all this fear, and the presence is coming closer and closer. And I'm having the thought, I've failed the test. I've failed as a father. And I had this thought as the presence came right behind me. I just thought, I hope I can be forgiven. And with that thought, and this almost felt physical too, these divine arms just wrapped around and held me and my little boy. And then it's like the lid came off. It's like just a download, just a downpouring of peace and love and truth. And with this thought, I hope I can be forgiven, the first communication was, there's nothing to forgive. Everything's in divine order. And I thought, but how can that be? I mean, he's here, I'm crippled. How can that be? Right. And I began to see my life. Here I am held in these divine arms, and I'm watching my life, and I'm saying, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And I'm attempting to justify things, but the creator that held me said, what did you learn? There was no judgment. It was just, what did you learn? And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I learned that. I guess I learned that. I certainly learned that. And I even saw things and I thought, well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong. And I did it anyway. But it was so interesting to look at my life being held in these loving arms, because as I made those judgments, I was told, those are your judgments, not ours. We love you. You are as precious and as divine and as beloved as the little boy you hold. And I'm looking at my son and I'm like, he's perfect. There, he's perfect. And yet it was magnified. I'm holding my boy and I'm in the arms of the divine. And it was a very personal experience of so much love. And yet I knew it rippled out to every living soul. It felt like the entire universe. It felt like there was concourses just observing my silly little life and all this love and all this divine presence with no judgment, with no comparison. And it was really mind-blowing. It was heart-expanding. I had never felt such unconditional love. And it was interesting because, and this was very difficult for me to share for years, because as I'm in the arms of God, I'm told, I want you to exercise your will. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. It's your will be done. I've known that. I've been taught that. It's your will be done. And what I was told is that God said to me, my will is your will. That's how much you're loved. My will is that you have free will. My will is that you get to choose. And in this moment, you can choose to be mad at God the rest of your life, because the accident happened or it was allowed to happen, or you didn't get a warning. You didn't get Tamara got to run and hug her parents. I was worried about work, and I could be mad about that. And that was a choice and that was okay. I was told I could beat myself up for the rest of my life because I was driving the car, and that was a choice. It was this intense tutorial on choice. But as I was also told, you can give your son to me. You can hand him over. You can trust and let go, and therefore he won't be ripped away. You will exercise your will, and you can give him over, and it won't feel so brutal because your will be part of the whole scenario. And in all that peace and all that love and all that beauty and all that trust, I was able to kiss my little boy and hand him over. And, and then whoosh, back to the hospital bed and the amputation and the colostomy bag and the braces and the whole thing. And, I don't want anyone to think I had this accident and had these profound experiences and then I was okay. No, the accident happened and I did have profound spiritual experiences, but I grieved like anyone else, but it was a different. I had a little bit of an insight, and I think this was a gift for me. I mean, I don't even pretend that my little Griffin's a toddler up in those realms. I think the universe knew, God knew I needed to hold my little boy. And somehow in the cosmic realm that was granted. And it was granted with experiencing a father's love in a way I'd never experienced. And I had a great dad. My dad loved me no matter what. But this was a profound, divine, unconditional love. And I knew it went out to every living soul. And that was, the takeaway, coming back and then thinking, wow, how do I deal with all this? And how can I possibly, it didn't necessarily align with all of my upbringing. It's like, wow, I thought I'd failed the test. And in the arms of God, I was told life is not a test, my dear son. It's a gift. It's a gift. It's the perfect school. You're simply there to learn. And, I'm holding my little boy who was just learning to walk and just saying a few words. And I'm thinking, yeah, but he was perfect, even slobbering and bumping his head. And I felt that that's how we are. We're down here toddling about, running into each other and slobbering. And the entire universe just says, look at my children. They're learning to walk. They're taking their steps. They're learning, they're growing, they're expanding. And it was an interesting thing to just open up my heart in a different way and expand my faith, my belief, these words, my faith, my belief. It's like that was transformed into absolute trust. I had felt this love and this support in such a way that faith and belief was transformed into trust. And it was life-changing, at least for me.
Wow. So how I'm curious how did you, once you got healthy, having had all these experiences, how did you move forward? How did you say, okay, I'm here, I'm back here. Clearly I've received, there was nothing to be forgiven of. What happened. It's all in divine order. How did you then, it's been 28 years since this happened. You seem pretty put together to me. I didn't know that you had a leg amputated, but how did you use your mental fortitude to come back here and say, I've still got a work to do?
Wow. And that's a great question, Shane. It was one step at a time. It was a long healing process. It was rehab. I came out of the hospital in a wheelchair. I was in a wheelchair for a while. And there was something that happened coming out of the hospital that I think may have set the course for, I don't know, I'm going to say survival. Sometimes it was just, can I get to the next breath? Can I get to the next minute? Can I get to the next hour? Can I make it to the next day? But as I came out of the hospital, I mentioned the support of my brothers. They would have to literally pick me up and put me in this electric wheelchair. I had the one left hand that I could drive it with, and they were emphatic on getting me independent. And my younger brother had taken my son into his home just like one of his own. And I didn't even get to go home to my house. I had to go home to my younger brother's house. They'd put a hospital bed in one of the rooms. That was still home health and physical therapy and everything that was going on. But in coming home, and I was so worried about Spencer, my 7-year-old, how was he going to accept this? I had been the rough and tumble dad, and, we'd run and play. And now I was in a wheelchair with one leg and one arm that worked properly and a colostomy bag. And how was he ever going to accept this? And he had seen me in the hospital, but now we were going home to his turf. We're going to have to go to the grocery store at some point. And I was really concerned about that. And of course, my brothers came to get me, and they loaded me in the car and got the electric wheelchair and were taking me home. And we pulled up to the house. And as we did, I saw Spencer looking out the window. He's watching, as his uncles, my brother, are literally lifting me out of the car and putting me in this electric wheelchair. And I'm so worried about what is he seeing? How's he going to accept this? And, I got situated in the chair, and they'd build a ramp for me to get in the house, and they were emphatic I'd do it myself. And Spencer came running out of the house, and he ran toward me, and then he went right past me. And I thought, this is too much. It's just, the amputated leg. I looked like a freak in a wheelchair. And I thought, this is too much for him. I get it. It's overwhelming. And I began to navigate my way to the ramp to turn up and go in the house. And I just looked over my shoulder to see where he went. And he had actually run across the street, and he was knocking on all the neighbors' doors. He started shouting, come out, my dad made it home. Come see my dad.
Oh, man.
And
that's going to make me cry.
I'm bawling. Yeah, I'm bawling. He made
the loop. It's like It's like the prodigal son, but reversed. Instead of the dad
Yes.
running home, it's the son saying, my dad's home. That's
My
amazing.
dad's here. Come see my dad. I was so ashamed. I was such a wreck. And he made the loop, and then he came and threw himself on my lap, which just about killed me because I still had all the sutures and everything from the abdominal repair. And I held him and I explained, look, I'm going to work really hard to get better. He was a Star Wars nut. I said, they're going to get me a Darth Vader leg and I'm going to learn how to walk, but it's going to be like this for a while. And it was interesting. He said something to me, and he's a full grown man now. He's married. In fact, I have a grandson. He and his wife brought a little grandson into the world here a year ago. And he said to me, he said, Dad, if you were nothing but a puddle of blood, I would still love you. We burst into laughter through the tears, and I'm holding him. And the whole reason I share this is here I was in a wheelchair holding my surviving son. And suddenly that was no less divine than being in the other realm in the arms of God, holding my son who had passed away. Like heaven was right here. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to do. There was nothing to become. It was simply to be perfect in that moment and hold that little boy and feel his unconditional love and realize we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. We're going to take it one step at a time. And I realized heaven's right here. Heaven can be right here if we open up to it, if we're willing to look at things that way. And that's probably what got me through. I would hold on to that moment as I eventually learned how to walk and got back to work and took on life and just realizing there's always a choice every moment. and that's it. Life is just a string of moments, like a string of pearls, moment to moment to moment to moment. And there's a choice in every moment. And I've made good choices that work, and I've made bad choices that didn't work. But I remember being held in those divine arms and realizing, well, what have you learned? What have you learned? And made the adjustments, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning.
Yeah. So I've noticed some things here. I do a lot of podcasts, and David Douglas is on a lot of them. And I've been watching him. He's been highly emotional. And so, David, maybe tell me a little bit about what has impacted you and what is creating this, I guess, emotion or stirring in you.
Yeah, Jeff, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. It's really been powerful. I just want to tell you I appreciate it because, it gives a perspective that most of the time we don't have. And yours is very, very personal, very, very deep. And you shared it in such a way that was very visual and vivid, that I felt like I was in your shoes in what you experienced. And which is very powerful. And I have a love relationship between a father and son. I love seeing other people and their relationships with their fathers or with their sons. And same thing with my dad. We were in a car accident when I was a kid, and everybody was thrown from the vehicle. My dad actually had a near-death experience as well, where he was thrown from the vehicle through the windshield. At the time, my parents were separated and going towards divorce, and ended up that my dad had a girlfriend at the time. I didn't grow up LDS up until when I turned 15. That's when I actually was raised like a Latter-day Saint. But during this time, in third grade, or as a 10-year-old, my parents were having a hard time, and when he was thrown from the vehicle, he remembered seeing the daughter of his girlfriend's daughter. He grabbed her, and it was like slow motion. He was able to catch her and then roll to his back so he would land on his back. And the next thing he knew is he had a choice to either stay on earth or, to go home. And he wanted to be with his kids. He wanted to raise them. And so he decided to stay to be with us. And and he remembered hearing us crying, and he wanted to be there, and still today he's here with us. He's here with us, and I'm thankful. I don't get a lot of time with him, but he's planning on coming out to visit me in Utah and our kids, and so I'm very much looking forward to that. But when I heard you also say that God loves us so much that he wants our will, is just so impactful, because I've been going through some hard choices as well, and I've been wondering, which way should I go? What should I do? And how can I make things work and do this mission of Zion Media, and do what the Lord has called me to do? And I'm turned both ways, and turned through all sorts of weaves and paths that I've not known before. And to know that the Lord's will is to have our will as well, shows me an immense amount of love that I never knew, or that I didn't realize how deep it would go. So thank you for sharing that, Jeffrey.
Wow. Well, thank you, David. Thank you. Now I'm the one over here leaking, out of my eyes. But yeah, this love of a father to their children, and how that aligns. We all have experiences, and yet it's the emotions. This is the thing. Our experiences are vast and diverse and different, but our emotions are what links us and ties us together as humankind. We all have felt fear or love or these intense emotions, regardless of the circumstances. And you share, and I feel the emotion of that, and that's what links us. I always say emotion is the voice of spirit. That's the language of spirit, is our feelings.
Totally. So, Jeff, how has it, again, it's been 28 years. Where are you now? Like obviously this had a deep impact on you. You were able to recover. Talk to me a little bit about just like, did you end up remarrying? Obviously you stayed active in the church. Did this experience, I assume, drew you closer to the Savior Jesus Christ and closer to our Heavenly Father? Talk to me a little bit about the journey post that accident and recovery.
Yeah, no, an intense journey, and yes, closer to the divine, absolutely. Questions about my life and about things that went on. Yes, I did remarry. I fell madly in love, and Tanya, my second wife, if you will, came in, and we adopted 2 boys, and we raised these boys, and then I went through divorce, and again, that's a choice. That's a choice, and I haven't talked about this publicly. I haven't talked about this. That was as intense as death, maybe more so. So.
I've been there.
In death, I knew Tamara loved me, and the experience, I knew where she was. It wasn't just theology or theory. I experienced it. And there was also the finality that she wasn't coming back. Divorce is a little different when it's, I love you, but I want something different, or I don't love you, or I love you differently. And you don't know where they are or what's happening, except they're still here. And I love Tanya, and I always will. But the relationship has shifted, and I don't know, maybe the soul contract is over, but there's always choice. There's always choice. And that was another chapter, and it's all in my book, Knowing. Gosh,
you have a book.
I do. All of this is in a book, Knowing. That's the title of it, Knowing by Jeffrey.
Do you have the book nearby?
How can people get the book?
You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon.
Well,
it's there.
David will flash it up. He'll go find it on Amazon right now so people know where to find it. But speaking of divorce, I went through a divorce too. You don't know my story. They call me the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street. I used to be worth a bunch of money, lost everything, went to prison for 5 years. It's a long story. But in that process, my wife of 13 years and 4 kids decided that contract was up. And, and honestly, it was, I say in many ways, it might've been harder than death itself. Like you said, it's a very, very challenging thing to lose that person who you loved, and you still love this person, and you got to interact with this person, but it's so different. Right. And it was a challenge. It was a hard thing. And there are many people that are dealing with that. And I think it's even harder for us as members of our faith. It's like divorce in my mind. Like I failed, like I really failed at this, and I don't like failing at things. Okay. Here's your book. Okay.
There you go.
Right here. So you can get it on Amazon. Hey, go get it. This is just, I'm sure, just the cliff notes of what actually happened here with Jeff here. Talk to us a little bit about writing this book. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Oh, wow. And it was an incredible journey. I never intended to write a book. I never intended to share this outside of a tight circle of family and friends. I was actually teaching a Sunday school class, and one of our neighbors was there in the class, and oddly enough, the subject was on the love of God, and I couldn't even hold it together. I'm just sobbing, trying to give this lesson. And she came up after and she said, "Something happened to you, didn't it?" And I said, "Yes, but I don't talk about it." And she said, "Well, I'd like to come over tonight and talk about it." And I acquiesced to that, and I told her what had happened. This was years ago. And she said, "Oh my gosh, you've got to talk to this friend of mine at the university. He studies this stuff. He studies what is a Buddhist experience as opposed to a Christian, as opposed to an atheist. What is it?" And, she said, "Will you please come and talk to him?" And I reluctantly agreed, and I came and shared the story with him, and we were both crying. And he said, "You've got to come speak to our group." And I said, "No, I don't talk about this publicly." And he said, "Look, some folks are in late stage cancer. They're actually facing death. People have lost loved ones." He said, "We even have a group of goth teenagers that are obsessed with death. Please come and speak to this little group in Salt Lake City," which I did. Reluctantly, but I did, and I could barely share this story then. I mean, understand, it's been so many years. I can talk about it now without falling apart, but back then I'd just fall apart. And I did that, and some guy in the back came up and he said, "You're going to write a book." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to write a book." And he had gotten my information from the organizers of this little group. It's called IONS. It was the International Association for Near-Death Studies. They study this stuff. But anyway, that was a Friday. Monday, there was a book contract in my email. He'd gotten my information from the organizers, and
wow.
And I was reluctant. But I pray, in fact, and Tanya was the one that took me back to the scene of the accident. And she said, "You spend some time here and you get clear," and I prayed. I asked God. I had that conversation. Gosh, there's this book contract in my email. I don't really want to do it. And I don't profess to get answers like this every day, but there on the side of the road where the whole accident had taken place, that voice that speaks to the heart, I got a profound answer, and I can quote what I was told. This would be the book of Jeff, chapter 1, verse 1. I was told, "Share your experience and others will heal." And I thought, well, wow, if it's not about me, if it's about others, then maybe I can do that. And if it's about healing, and I'd done some healing at that point, but there was barriers. I mean, I didn't want people to think I was crazy in sharing this. And I certainly didn't want them to think that in some way I was special. I mean, we're all special, and no one's special. All are the same in the eyes of God.
That's right.
But there was also that thing about, wow, I've got a book contract there. Can I receive a royalty check based on the story that was a catastrophe that took half my family, and I was driving the car. That was the big one. It's like, can I do that? But with this answer, with this share your experience and others will heal, I signed the book contract, and I wrote the book, which was painful. I mean, I would do it at night when everyone was sleeping. I would cry and relive it. And if there's anything in the book that's any good, it's probably because it came through channeled. I don't fancy myself a writer, but in fact, I had to finally just think, okay, I'm writing for my family. My mom's going to buy a copy. Who cares? I kind of had to remove myself from any expectation of anything. But the book released, it hit number 3 on Amazon in the category. My whole life changed. And suddenly, I found myself telling the story, doing podcasts. In fact, I was all over the world. I mean, gosh, I was in Amsterdam. I was in London. I was in Scotland. I was in Mexico. I was all over, the country and the world, sharing this story and just crying and opening my heart. And this, the first letter that came from the publisher, I mean, here it was in the publisher's letterhead. And I thought, oh, is this that royalty check? And there wasn't a ton of money in writing a book. I think you have to be like, J.K. Rowling to make a lot of money in the book. But the envelope came and I opened it, and it wasn't a check at all. It was a little 3x5 card with a bunch of pencil hen scratch on it. And I thought, well, what's that? I turned it over and I realized it was jail mail, Shane. It was jail mail. It was from an inmate. It was from an inmate. And he had somehow gotten my book, and he said, look, I lost my family too, not to death. They've abandoned me based on what I did. And he said, I did it, and I'm paying my price to society. But he said, I will come out different. He said, your book changed me. I know I'm loved. And I wept at that. I thought, wow, that's the grandest royalty check I'll ever get from an inmate in Vancouver, Yeah. And I thought, that's the one. That's the guy I wrote the book for. That's it. That's good enough. And there's been countless emails and letters and things like that. And if it's about someone else's healing, then that's the purpose. That's a very long answer to your very short and poignant question, but writing the book was interesting. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I tell people this, I mean, we all have gone through certain things, some people more traumatic than others. And when our purpose is to help others heal through our story, I think God is pleased. And I think we have to be okay opening up, okay being authentic. I talk to people all the time that suffer from addiction, and I'm like, one of the best things you can do is to, especially those that have overcome it, or maybe even those that are still struggling with it, is to talk about it, because you never know who you can help. And if you don't share, how can you help others? And we're here to help others heal. We're here to share our experience. Just like you sharing your experience it's had a significant impact on me, but certainly on David Douglas, because he's gone through something traumatic as well. And so we are here to heal. There's no question of that. I appreciate you taking the time out of, I know your busy schedule, and I feel honored to have you on here and to have cried with you.
We get to share tears. One thing comes up, and I'll share this quickly because it's so poignant, and it's coming in. When you talk about sharing and being open and vulnerable, I mean, there's that Old Testament story of Moses and the children of Israel out in the desert, and the fiery serpents were biting them. And if they were dying. I mean, and Moses goes, he goes to God. He says, what do I do? And he's told, well, fashion a serpent and put it on a staff. And if they'll look at it, they'll heal. And I see so many layers to this story, because I think we all have those fiery serpents, those things in our life that are biting our butt and destroying us, right? But when we put them, when we put them out, when we put them on a staff, when we raise them up and we can look at them and say, wow, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I got. Here's what I did. Here's what I didn't do. We heal. We heal by looking at it, by really taking a look at those fiery serpents. And then, of course, there's, there's the similitude of the Son of God and all the things that are mixed in with that as well. But I love how the Master, when he came, said, come and feel my wounds. Come and see my wounds. We don't heal each other until we're willing to show our wounds and let each other feel them and see them. And that's where empathy comes. I think the magic in all of that is empathy. Wow, I've been through something too. Let's talk about it and let's heal it.
I love that. I love that. This has been we've done, I don't know, David, 400 episodes. This has been a pinnacle episode for me anyways. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your heart, for telling your story. These things that we're dealing with here on this earth life, they're not easy, and they weren't meant to be easy. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is that everything is happening in divine order. Nothing is happening to you, it's happening for you.
Yep.
And the universe is always conspiring in our favor. No matter what we're going through, no matter what we're dealing with, the universe is always conspiring in your favor. And I love 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 2. I remember this because it's 2 Nephi 2:2. And I just want to share this because there are so many people that are going through it. It's part of what we signed up for. I mean, I find it interesting that we shouted for joy. We're like, oh, I'm going to go get the crap kicked out of me. Yes, let's go. But in 2 Nephi 2:2, it says, nevertheless, Jacob, my firstborn, in the wilderness, thou knowest the greatness of God, and he shall consecrate thine afflictions for thy gain. And I think when we understand that the secret to the secret is gratitude in suffering, gratitude in tribulation, gratitude in trauma, gratitude when things just aren't going our way. When we can find a way to find gratitude in that, then we have conquered. Then we have overcome. And I love also the fact that you pointed out to me that the Savior showed us his wounds. He showed us his wounds. And it's symbolic in a lot of ways. Like, hey, I've been through it too. Mm-hmm. I've been where you've been. I've been through the struggle. Like, I know we only have a little bit of his life, and the life that we do have of his is one of perfection. But what we don't know is what he went through throughout the eternities and throughout the eons of time. And if he knows us, then he's been where we've been. He's been through trauma. He's been through divorce. He's been through pain. He's been through it. And that's why he is who he is. And that's why I think we can always trust in our Savior Jesus Christ to help guide the way, because he's been there too. So, Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming on. This has, again, been an amazing episode. I would love sometime, honestly, I live in Farmington, Utah, but I would love to set up a time just to go to lunch with you. I'm going to buy a copy of your book. I'm going to bring it to you and have you sign it for me. And I'm going to check it out. I'm a big reader. In prison, I was the librarian. So I read 20 to 25 books a month in there. And you would be amazed how books impact those inmates. And inmates are some of the most or best well-read people that I've ever encountered. So thank you again for tuning in. Hey, if you like this, it's super easy. Just smash that like button. I'm telling you, if there's an episode that we've done here on Zion Media to share it. Hit the share button. Share it with your family. Share it with your friends. Share it with those that are having their own faith crisis. I think this message can inspire them to reconnect back with our Heavenly Father and look to our Savior Jesus Christ. I think this is a message of hope. It's a message of trauma, but it's also a message of God's got us. He knows what he's doing with us. He's got us. And we just need to trust that there is a divine plan and that all that we're going through is part of that divine plan. So for myself, I'm Shane Baldwin. For David the Lion Douglas and Jeff Olson, we'll see you guys all next time.
never been the kind to testify, never found the words to make it right. But he calls my name, says rise and stand, a willing heart, a helping hand. And if I walk, if I believe, he'll give me strength, he'll set me free. He calls me now, I hear his voice, to stand for truth, to make the choice. No turning back, I trust his plan. I'll go where only faith can stand. How can I keep this gift inside when I can't lift a soul to light? I am a witness to his mercy, to his glory. I put my future in his hands. He's made me more than who I am. When I put my faith in him, the truth begins to speak. His power is real, it moves me until I will not be still. Oh, oh, oh. I will not be still. Oh, oh, oh. I will not be still. Lifting the hands weighed down with sorrow, strengthening hearts to see tomorrow, reaching the hopeless, calling them home. His love restores, they're not alone. And when I see their lives made new, I know this path was always true. He calls me now, I hear his voice, to stand for truth, to make the choice. No turning back, I trust his plan. I'll go where only faith can stand. How can I keep this gift inside when I can't lift a soul to light? I am a witness to his mercy, to his glory. I put my future in his hands. He's made me more than who I am. When I put my faith in him, the truth begins to speak. His power is real, it moves me until I will not be still. The power's real, I hear him call, through every rise, through every fall. I step in faith, I stand up tall, I will not be still at all. How can I keep this gift inside when I can't lift a soul to light? I am a witness to his mercy, to his